Hello and welcome to Career Stories, the podcast that shares other people's career stories to help you with yours. I'm Dr. Luella Forbes, and each week I sit down with leaders, experts and entrepreneurs to uncover the stories behind their careers. Listen every Wednesday for the latest career story. Hello and welcome to the April Career Advice episode of Career Stories. I'm Dr. Luella Forbes.
And I'm Associate Professor Michelle Gander. So I just need to say that all of the opinions I express in this podcast are my own and not the opinions of my employer, Murdoch University.
And we'll just add that that's the case for all of our guests as well, that it's their voices are not the voices of Murdoch University or their employers. So in today's episode, we are recapping on the interviews that we've had this month. We had Jo Lindsay, who was my first boss back in Birmingham in the UK. We had Elizabeth Schär, who is the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Lead Partner for PwC Australia. And we had Dr. Annelen Schär, who is a sales and marketing leader for Mercedes-Benz in Stuttgart. And yes, I did go overseas to record those. I will add that I was going overseas anyway, but so I didn't go specifically for that. But great opportunity, I think, to hear from some really different people. I did want to just mention before we go into your reflections on the episodes that I've been trying really hard to kind of curate the months and to try and get a real balance of like maybe more experienced people and more junior people in different careers and different industries. And I thought I had done a really good job until I realised that actually all of this month's guests all work in sales and marketing in some way, shape or form. But I guess what it shows is that maybe sales and marketing doesn't always have to take the kind of, none of them would describe themselves particularly as salespeople, kind of particularly. And so you can kind of do those things in non-traditional sales roles, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. I think when we think of sales, we kind of think of that quite, aggressive kind of,
used car
salesman. I wasn't going to say that, but that no kind of thing. That's kind of what we have in our heads, I guess. Whereas actually, as you say, the three guests would definitely, and I think Annelen definitely said she was more in sales, but
they have kind of broader roles.
They have broader roles than that, for sure, yeah.
So having listened to this month's episode, what did you want us to talk about this week, or what were your reflections?
So I think I loved the episodes. I just want to say, all of them were really different people, different roles, but again, very interesting. I love hearing about people's different careers, and perhaps Mercedes want to sponsor the podcast. That would be nice. No, I've always wanted a Mercedes. So.
Me too.
Maybe, I think I can put in a good word. But I think when you think about the kind of thread perhaps that was going through all of them, I think there were two threads, and one was certainly around the role of mentoring and sponsorship. And one, I think, was around the subject of, the attitude that you bring into the workplace, and that I would say how that links with that more conceptual idea of having a growth mindset. And I think all of the guests talked about that in some way.
Yeah, great. So we're going to talk about the mentoring and sponsorship. We're going to do that as a bonus episode.
Yep.
And we will put that out in the next month or so. And we're going to focus on growth mindset and kind of learning generally in the workplace, because I think they all talked about that. And actually, one of the bits that I actually didn't make the cut for my interview with Jo was about her learning mindset, because I remember when I first got the job working for her, I think she was a new leader. I mean, I was like 21 and she would have been maybe 25 or 26. So she felt like she was very ancient and more experienced than me at that time. But in hindsight, we were both babies, really. But she'd ended up in this kind of leadership role, and we talked about how she was feeling a bit out of her depth. But one of the things that she used to do is before we had a team meeting is she would go and read. She had like some management books and she would go and read some management books and then come and bring an idea to the team meeting that we would then talk about or discuss. So it might have been an icebreaker, it might have been an article in Harvard Business Review or something like that. And
interesting.
I really enjoyed the experience of her bringing those things in when I was new too, because it kind of taught me that my leader didn't know everything. And because even though obviously she was ancient at like 26 or whatever, that it was nice to know that, you know, you were expected to still learn.
Yes. And that's a really good point, and we haven't explored, although I'm sure we will at some point, around that idea of as a senior member, team member, leader, like not knowing everything is fine. And I think that authenticity around you in that leadership role, or her in that leadership role at the time, but, you know, all of us in those roles, you know, actually accepting that there's no way you can know everything is a really powerful kind of tool as well, I think. So maybe we'll come back to that.
Well, I think that is the embodiment of the growth mindset, really, isn't it? To a certain extent.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I suppose there's two things for me. There's the, knowing that there are things that you need to continue to learn, and all of our jobs, even Jo, who'd been in that company for however many years it was now, like she made it really clear that, you know, that she's taken on new roles and new projects, and there's always new things to learn. I think you can understand that about yourself. I think some people struggle with when they get into a leadership role with letting other people know that. So I think they're two slightly different but connected
I think you're right.
things.
I think you're right. And I think it is hard because it means that you have to show some kind of vulnerability or something.
Yeah.
When, you know, particularly if you're feeling like you're, you know, wanting to impress everybody and show everybody that you know how to do the job, then it can feel really hard to say, I don't know.
Absolutely.
To something.
Yeah. So I think that's a whole subject that we could probably talk about at a later date.
Because then we can talk about asking for help as well, which is one of my passion topics to discuss.
Yeah, and people don't do it enough for sure. But if we think about that idea of the growth mindset and what we mean by that, I suppose, I mean, it's a relatively old concept now, maybe like 40 years old, and it was originally kind of promulgated by an American psychologist, Carol Dweck. Although I think some of that research has been, I wouldn't say debunked, but more nuanced over the years, from where she said that, you know, a growth mindset is where you accept that people's capacities can grow over time. And I think, you know, of course, you know, I think I personally sign up to that as being an educator. Yeah. I don't think there's no time that we as humans can't learn new things. And I actually used to work for the Open University in the UK, which is a distance education provider. And we would have students in their 70s, 80s, 90s taking degrees at that time. So that just kind of goes to show that there's always opportunities to learn new things.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because when I was, I've just come back from Europe because I went to go graduate. So Annelen and I were both in a graduation ceremony in
Congratulations,
France.
by the way.
Yes. I was chatting to my mum about it. And so my mum started doing a doctorate when she was in her 40s. And then for various, you know, life reasons, including the fact that she worked full time and had 3 kids and, you know, all of those kind of life pressures, she kind of never finished it. And she was chatting and she said, oh, maybe I could finish it. I was like, of course you could go finish it if you wanted to. So, I obviously subscribe to that as well. And I think, but one of the things I was reflecting on though, when I was thinking about the conversation that I had with Annelen, is that what I don't want people listening to the podcast to take away is that you must have formal education.
No. Yeah.
And so just because you and I have done academic study and because Annelen's done academic study, that's not really what we're talking about. We're not talking about going and getting lots and lots of formal qualifications, are we?
No, although that is part of it, right? In any
it's
work.
a way of doing it.
In a sense. So no, we're talking about, I suppose for me as well, I think being curious is really important. Like that curiosity drives so much development and growth. I always say that I'm nosy, but you know, I think curious is a better word.
Yeah.
And I think in the workplace, that kind of that lifelong or you know career span curiosity serves you really well, and that might mean that you are curious about a different department in your organisation, and then you just go and find out a bit more about it, and that might just be talking to some people, figuring out what it is that they do, but it might mean that actually you're really curious about, you know, strategy development, and so you might then go and do some sort of professional course or certificate. Can you get certification maybe in strategic leadership?
Yeah, so you might go on some learning. You might also have some mentoring. You might go and get some extra practice doing something.
You might just read a book.
You might read a book. You might listen to a podcast. You might, watch a YouTube video. Maybe that is also a podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
So when we're talking about learning in all of the senses, not necessarily about formal skill qualifications, although that is one thing that you can do to help you.
That is one thing you can do. And I think when you're more at the beginning of your career, that's often a really good way of developing yourself. Organisations generally, you know, larger organisations will have professional development units or professional development budget. And so there is opportunities for more formal kind of qualifications, for example. And it's interesting that, you know, the rise in Doctorate of Business Administration, which is what you and Annelen did, is a really interesting kind of step away from the traditional PhD to something that's more practical and applied to business. I think it's a really interesting and positive kind of move that more people are going, actually, I do need these higher level skills, but I'm not going to be an academic, right? So a PhD really is about training to be an academic.
Yeah.
A DBA is about taking those higher level skills and applying them back to your business or a new business. And hint, you can come and do a DBA with me if you like.
So I think maybe one of the things that would be useful is to us talk about kind of what's the difference, I guess, between the terms like a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, because those are the two kind of contrasting extremes, let's call them, because I'm not sure it's an either or. It's not an either or, and things are never really that black and white, are they?
No, not where my brains are concerned.
But what we're talking about is growth mindset and fixed mindset. Do you mind maybe talking about the fixed mindset?
Yeah, so the fixed mindset is a little bit more around people believe that your inherent intellectual capacity, I suppose, is fixed after a certain time. Whereas if you more align with that growth mindset, as I said, you think that your skills, capabilities, adaptability can continue to change and over the life course. So if you think about it in terms of, I agree. I think it's a continuum, and I think sometimes we can become fixed if perhaps things are not going well in our jobs. We retrench into that more fixed mindset, which is about you thinking, well, I can't change, I can't improve my situation.
Well, I think so. Just taking a really tangible example, I'm not meaning to bang on about the fact that I went to Europe, but I went to Europe.
Did you go to Europe?
I went to Europe. And so I don't speak any Spanish, and I speak a little bit of French. And I was in France and Spain, and it's quite easy to get yourself in a mindset where you go, I don't speak any Spanish. You're going to have to speak English to me because I just don't speak any Spanish. And that you get that kind of rabbit in the headlight looks when you go into a restaurant and they're like coming and asking you in Spanish what you would like to eat. And you're like, could I have a menu, please? Like in English. But that's a bit of a fixed mindset type thing that goes, well, I don't know anything and I can't learn anything.
Yeah.
And then I spent some time with my cousin who speaks fluent Spanish and is Scottish but lives in Spain and has learnt Spanish fluently since I've last seen her. And then I got all kind of like, wow, and impressed and excited about how cool it was that she could go into restaurants and just order anything. And so then I got a bit bolder and was like, well, actually, I did French GCSE, so I can probably speak a bit of French. And so then had a go when I was in France at ordering, and I managed to order a whole meal, including talking about allergies and all of that kind of stuff in French. And I was so proud of myself and excited about, actually, maybe I could one day learn to speak French fluently. But I think that's the kind of two examples, right? That I can't and I don't know anything and it's not worth me even trying
because I can't.
Because I can't.
I'm not capable of.
And then I can and, you know,
I'm going to give it a go.
And I'm going to give it a go and and it doesn't matter too much if I fail.
Yes, absolutely. And actually kind of related to that is also like if you're a bit more in a fixed mindset, like if you did get feedback, let's say, like you take it as a criticism if you have a fixed mindset. So, I mean, obviously sometimes none of us like to get like feedback on how we could improve, but actually the difference is that if you've got a growth mindset, of course you might still go, oh God, I was like, you know, I need to figure that out. But you will take it as a push to do something about that feedback. Whereas if you've got more of a fixed mindset, you'll take it as a criticism and not be able to do anything with it. And then I suppose one of the key ones is if you've been given a task that you find extremely difficult, like the likelihood is if you're operating more in a fixed mindset, that you will just give up on that task. Whereas if you're in a growth mindset, although you understand it's difficult, you also understand that the effort that you need to put in, the outcome is of great, you know, achievement, reward kind of thing. So you'll persevere through a very difficult task.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You've reminded me of my doing. I did further maths for some reason at the end of high school, and I felt like I'd got to like a top of a ladder, and I just didn't understand anymore, and I kind of was like I don't want to do it anymore. Now, in reality, I probably could have if I had wanted to. But I just kind of got a bit stubborn about it because I didn't like it and I didn't want to.
I don't blame you for that.
But so I think there's the point that, back to the point about continuum, it means that you can, there will be some things that you will have a growth mindset around and other things that maybe you won't because of the opportunity that they create for you or not. Like I don't think understanding further maths would have been any benefit to me at all in my career as it has panned out. So I didn't miss out. But
I think that's right. And I think that, you know, you can see that with, you know, if you've got kids that are going through exams, and sometimes like we do take to some subjects more than others, right? So I dropped a language as soon as possible because I was taught French for years and years and years, still can't speak a word of it. I'm also not a big fan of maths, you know, so even kids don't want to put the effort in. Whereas actually it was really interesting. I saw something the other day saying the same way that you'd have to practice a musical instrument, you also have to practice maths.
Yes, exactly.
And so it's kind of the same practice base, but we don't think of it like that. We think, oh God, math is really hard and I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
I kind of thought that about French as well.
So I'm glad we're talking about this though, because the other thing that I really care about is what we call the above the line and below the line behaviours. And what we mean by that is depending on if we're feeling stressed or not, we might bring some kind of negative thoughts and kind of cynicism to what we're doing. And then if we're feeling good about things, we might bring some more kind of open-minded and opportunity and curious thoughts about things. And I think that that can sometimes overlap with whether you have a growth mindset or not. So if you're feeling really stressed at work and you're feeling really worried and anxious about things, it can be quite hard to find your growth mindset in all of that, because all you can see is all the problems.
Yeah.
And whereas if you're feeling good about yourself and good about the world, and I mean, it's hard to do that at the moment, I'll be honest, but if you're feeling good about yourself and good about kind of your job and what's happening, you're probably going to find it easier to be to have a growth mindset. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. And I think as well, you know, the research has shown a positive link between having a growth mindset and job satisfaction. So there is that, you know, I don't have the stats on me, but there is.
I think I might. Hang on a second. I think it's on one of my cards. At 30%.
30%, there you go. So that's a significant increase. But I think we also have to be aware that we all have different energy levels at different times, and your kind of energy level, which is determined by lots of different things in your environment, actually determines a lot of how you react to things in the workplace, you know, stress and burnout. And, you know, we've all been super busy at times, and it's really difficult then to bring the energy to learning and developing yourself. You know, you can't be doing that all of the time. And then we also have to consider that there is a kind of pattern at play in our jobs as well, whereas we start a new job and we're super motivated and our kind of motivation goes through the roof. And then over time, you know, the
grind.
Yeah, the grind kind of takes over and your satisfaction dips. And that's when really people start looking for new opportunities, be it in the same organisation or outside. And then it's a bit of a roller coaster, right? So you start, you know, you get, you know, annoyed enough or bored enough or whatever it might be that pushes you to get another job. We talked about a bit about this last time, and your motivation is back through the roof. And
we talked about there being like a 4 year
four-year
cycle.
So it's kind of, and it's all kind of linked, and that, you know, whether you've got a growth mindset or not, you're still going to go through that kind of roller coaster. And that's why the research shows really clearly that the longer you've been in the job, the less job satisfaction that you have, kind of regardless, really. So the longer tenure, the worst kind of satisfaction outcomes you have, which is really interesting. Why it's interesting when people say they've, like Jo, she was in that same organisation, but she has not had the same job.
Well, in the same, I mean, Annelen's been at Mercedes for 15 years or something, so, but also has not had the same job. So one of the things then, if people are listening to this and kind of trying to figure out if they kind of where they sit from a growth mindset perspective, I think one of the things they can do is think about where they are generally in terms of that kind of life cycle of their job. You know, are they still in the new and exciting phase? Are they kind of feeling slightly more cynical and jaded because they've been there for a while? There's actually a really good video on above and below the line behaviours, which I'll put in the show notes for people, because it explains it really well and really helps you think about kind of where you're at the moment. And then I think if you're feeling cynical about things, where can you find that curiosity from, and where can you find that excitement? What is the thing that would get you excited and wanting to learn, and how can you move yourself out of that kind of position? Is that?
I think what you have to do is, you know, all jobs have different facets to them. You're not going to find every single part of your job interesting, and that's probably true as well if you're in a kind of a bit of a trough situation. But try and find the one thing in your job or even in the wider kind of team or department or whatever that you do think that's the thing that at least gives you some joy at work, and maybe hook onto that and decide that, I know we all have our tasks that we have to do, and it's not always kind of, you can't just go, oh, I'm going to do this now and not do any of my other stuff, but try and spend a little bit more time maybe investigating that aspect, or just trying to find the positives out of what it is in the environment that's under your control a bit, and try and take it the next step, that curiosity, like, okay, so if I'm really interested in this, well, who else is doing that in a different department? Or, can I go and talk to this person? And just try and give yourself a little bit of more, I'm struggling for the word, happiness for want of a better word.
I think it is that kind of joy, isn't it? It's the, how do you go from being glass half empty to glass half full?
Yes.
And which is the same amount of full.
Yeah, that's right.
But just looked at through a different lens. Yeah. And so I think that's a real skill for people, is learning to lift up. I think that's something that I've got quite good at over time, is trying to find those opportunities and the exciting things. And because I love learning so much, it kind of doesn't really matter what it is. Yeah. Like, I'm like, oh, cool, I get to learn how to edit a podcast.
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
Get to find the excitement in things but I think that that's something to think about. And I think if you find yourself feeling or saying, I can't and I don't know how and I'm never going to know how to do this, there's a sign that there's maybe something that you need to do differently. And whether that's kind of, you can find something exciting, or whether you need to start looking at something else then.
And I also think just trying to, even in jobs that have become more routine because you've just done them for a long time, like, you can still do other things. Maybe you start some sort of professional network within your organisation that's not a formal thing, but it's an informal thing where you get a group of people together to talk about certain things. Maybe you've got a book club. We always give recommendations, right? So a work book club, not...
Well, you just made me remember an example, actually, of a time where I was feeling quite lost. I was in consulting and I was feeling quite lost and like I didn't really know what I was doing, which I think was possibly a little bit true at the time. But also I think I felt like everybody else knew what they were doing and I didn't, which...
That's tough.
Which was really hard. And so I decided to be proactive because I like being proactive. And I created I think back on this now, it's so ridiculous. But anyway, I basically created a game, like a competition for our whole department, which was about improving the whole department's capability to do whatever the thing, like consulting skills capability type thing, which included sales and networking and, putting end-to-end life cycle stuff. And I was kind of like, I don't know how to do this. And the chances are other people don't either, even if they're pretending like they do. And so I created like a competition. So I created a gamified competition that I went and presented to the lead partner. I managed to get them to sign off some prizes, and it wasn't very much money at all. It was like, a small amount of money, but managed to get prizes, and we ran a 12-week competition. But what I actually, the genius part of this was what I actually did was get senior leaders in the organisation to come and speak about their area of expertise and explain how they did some of those things. So, for example, if you needed to do like networking and how did you think about networking, I got this guy who was like the master networker to come and talk about his networking, which, by the way, was crazy. He had a spreadsheet of 1,500 people and basically had scheduled like every single catch-up over the course of a year. It was very impressive. I went naming no names. And then, I got somebody else who was really good at, closing the client deal conversation type thing to come and talk about their experience of that. And you can see where the podcast themes come through, can't you? But what was really great about that was I basically created a situation where I wanted to learn something. And so I created a situation where not only was I going to learn it, but I kind of made everybody else to sign up to learning it too. And then basically got all of the experts in the firm to come and teach me how to do it. Now, it happened that other people were there as well, but they basically came and said, this is what I do, this is what I do. And the really exciting thing about that was that what ended up happening is even though they all in theory had the same job, they all did it completely differently. And so I was like, oh, okay, so there isn't a right way to do it. That's okay. I'm not doing it wrong. Yeah. And I've managed to find it out. Yeah. So that was but you can see my instincts are proactive learning.
Well, so I'll also give an example that might be useful for people is, so I joined Flinders University actually after a very, very large restructure, and there were lots of people that, had kept their jobs, they'd had to go through that awful thing where you reapply for your job and all of that kind of thing. Anyway, we'd got through it. And I joined the organisation, and I was kind of looking around for my people within this new organisation, right? I came across some great colleagues, and we decided that actually, because like so much effort had gone into the restructure, but there was kind of a bit of a vacuum in terms of, well, what's next? Like, I think we've said this before, like senior management kind of move on because they've done the restructure. They've done the work. This is something I
write about in my thesis, actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so they're kind of on to the next thing, whereas everyone's left going, how do I do my job and who should I talk to and what are all these? So me and a couple of colleagues actually just came up with, we created a career network in the organisation that we decided was going to fill the gap. And we did the same thing. We presented the idea to the chief operating officer and got him to give us some budget for like lunch and stuff. And then for a couple of years, once a month, there was a lunchtime meeting that, again, brought people to talk about different aspects of work. And it was the right solution to the issue at the time. 2 years, there was kind of, it kind of dissipated. There was no need for it anymore, right? So these things, they don't have to keep going.
No, they kind of ebb and flow,
They ebb and flow, yeah. So it was the right thing at the time. But then even just something as silly as if you're really feeling a bit stuck or you need a little bit of kind of joy in your work life, like the 10,000 steps challenge, right? Get your team together,
compete, do lunch and learns,
compete against another team, do lunch and learns. Like there's lots of things that you can do when you're in a bit of a hole that at least let you kind of rise up a little bit and find some enjoyment and some spark, because it's really important because and kind of getting back to the growth mindset thing where, research has shown if you do have a growth mindset, you are more resilient. So when something like a restructure comes along, some sort of career transition, and it could even be retirement, for example, you're just more adaptable. Your brain's more plastic, right?
You're finding those opportunities.
Yeah. So, that the fact that, there's also, if you have a growth mindset, you're more willing to help other people in the organisation, which is also really important.
Yeah, and the other stats that I had gathered were that, so we talked about 30% higher job satisfaction, 47% more likely to trust your colleagues.
Oh, interesting.
So obviously creates a better working environment generally, and then 34% more connected to the organisation.
Right, yeah.
Because you're seeing what the organisation, like the opportunities the organisation can create for you.
Yeah, and I think they're really important for managers to know this, because oftentimes managers are the people that can either sign off on professional development, if we're talking about more formal learning opportunities in the workplace, or they can put your name forward for things, or, it's important, I think, for managers to realise that giving staff the opportunity to continue to learn and grow. It's not just, you're not just doing it for those staff members' careers, you're actually doing it for the commitment that those staff then have to the organisation as well.
Yeah, and I think that to your point about signing off budget and things, one of the frameworks I like, although I know that there's not kind of much evidence that the statistics behind it are right, but the 70-20-10 learning model that kind of sort of says, you know, actually in reality, people are going to learn 70% on the job, 20% through mentors, and then 10% through formal training. Yeah. And I think, like I said, that maybe the 70, 20 and 10 are the wrong numbers, but I think, or aren't. We don't know that they're the right numbers, I think is probably the better way to put it. What we do know is that there are lots of ways that you can learn, and they don't all involve going on a training course. Yeah. And so you don't have to, so absolutely go and get your DBA with Michelle. Highly recommend it. I loved it for myself. But you have to do that for you because you want to do it. You know, if you're just looking to learn something new, you can go for a coffee with somebody. Yeah. You can do lunch and learns. You can organise something. You don't have to have done any of the. We tend to go a bit extreme, don't we? Like,
well, I think both of us like to collect qualifications as well. So that's
qualifications and
certifications.
And also we're probably also both quite proactive and kind of like organising things. And you know, you don't have to do any of that. Just go for a coffee with somebody and ask them some questions and be curious.
That's right, yeah.
You know, think about, ask your manager maybe, or managers think about, is there a mentor that you can pair up with somebody to help them learn on something? You know, can you have a shadowing, a buddy arrangement? Can, you know, you swap people
all
around in the team so that they get to learn some new things? Like, it doesn't have to be big or expensive.
Yeah. And I think actually
to be learning
shouldn't be, like, there might be times when you do something big and expensive, but actually mostly it's not, right, through your working life. There's only a few times that you'll do an MBA or a doctorate, right? That's, you know.
Well, hopefully.
Hopefully I don't want to do any more learning, formal learning. But, you know, you're talking about the 70-20-10. There's all, you know, informal learning in the workplace is as good as potentially formal learning. You often learn more from that relational conversation that you have with your colleagues, for example, about something. Think about how you learned to use, I don't know, Excel when you first joined the workplace. Probably somebody sat down with you, and I always remember, even now, because I'm not very good at Excel, I have to go and ask my finance person, how do I do this again?
It was like Beth's excitement learning how to use Format Painter in PowerPoint,
that's right.
Which, by the way, I remember her running around the office and going, have you seen this paintbrush? And I'm like, why haven't you been using that for the last 2 years? But I think that's a really good point. And I think also, if I think about my own experience in the workplace, I think that quite often I go to technical formal learning for technical skills. So I want to do a project management qualification, or I want to do a change management qualification or something like that. Whereas actually, in my experience, the best way to learn about some of the soft skills and the transferable skills that are frankly more important as you get more senior, and we've had lots of leaders talk already in we've only had 10 or 11 episodes, and already a common theme from leaders has been, I recruit for attitude and soft skills, not for technical skills. And so quite often people knee-jerk to, I need to learn how to be a project manager and go and do a technical qualification, rather than actually going and sitting with somebody who is a project manager and learning what they actually do and what the skills are that make them a good project manager, or whatever, substitute whatever career you like.
And it's a really good point, because actually, if you think about, and I think obviously, you have to do both of those things. Sticking with the project management, like getting project management qualifications of whichever flavour of project management you want to do is like super important. But actually, if you speak to a project manager about what they probably spend a lot of their time doing, I mean, unless you're maybe building bridges, I don't know. Actually, it's talking to people, right? Because that's how a project gets done. Communication.
Well, exactly. It's talking to people. It's about, being really clear about your expectations. It's about, being persistent, following up on people, being, communicating really visibly about what's happening and when, making sure everybody's on the same page. Like all of those kind of, negotiation skills.
All those soft skills.
All of those soft skills. And you can learn some of those on training courses. But actually, I think a lot of the time, those skills come through practice. And actually, if you want to get to be in a more senior position, it's those skills that people look for, not the technical qualification.
Absolutely, because at some point you tip from being a technical expert to being a general manager. You might not be called general manager, but you are
a leader.
You're a leader. And so what you got promoted for because you were really good at ABC, so you don't need to be good at ABC because you've got a U to do ABC. And actually, it's really annoying when your manager starts to think that they're still operational rather than more strategic. I think we've both had that. And it's very common, of course, especially when you get newly promoted, that you fall back onto the thing that's really comfortable, but is not actually what you're paid to do in a way. So, and actually a really good way of learning how to be a more senior in whatever career that you have is to role model off of more senior staff as well. So not only might you have a mentor, you might just have somebody that you're often in the same room with, that you just really like how they operate. I had an amazing boss a long time ago now, back in the UK. Like he was just so calm and just like nothing would faze him, whereas I was always a bit, energetic, edgy, shall we say? Spicy. So I really I learned from him, and he was one of the leaders that always talked last in a meeting, even though invariably he was the most important person in the room. He always talked last. He always let everybody have their say, and then he would come in with his view, because he knew if he spoke first, you don't get a good conversation, right? Especially more junior people often don't want to disagree with what the senior person said. So, this lots of learning opportunities. I have a list here. Should I go through my list?
Yeah, please.
So, examples to help develop a growth mindset. So, as we said, stay curious in whatever way that works for you. Mm-hmm. I've been very curious recently about Artemis 2 mission. I've been very overjoyed with all of that going on. Embrace challenges. So when somebody gives you a difficult piece of work, embrace the challenge and embrace that you're going to learn from that. Learn from feedback. So don't take it as a criticism, even though sometimes it may be critical to a degree. Take it as it was probably meant, and it's a way for you to improve yourself.
And it's a point of data.
It's
not
a point. Yes.
All of the
no,
points
that's
of
right.
Like
absolutely.
One piece of feedback is one piece of feedback.
That's right. See the effort as a path to expertise.
Yeah, I like that.
Persevere. Actively seek out learning opportunities. So be proactive. View competition as motivation and not a threat. So a lot of the time you are in teams and teams are competing with each other, but that just drives you, right? Doesn't have to be a threat. Be adaptable to change and push beyond your boundaries. And so I think of this in terms of, think of your job description as the things that you have to do, but you can do a lot more. So they're my top tips.
That's great. I love that. We'll put those in the show notes. And I think perhaps the competition one, maybe we can come back to that another time, because one of the ways that I've found helpful to not see competition as a threat is to think about collaboration with that. Like, how can I leverage what I do and what that person does, and can we do something together to get better, but together? But do you know what I mean?
I do, and I think a lot of the time people think of it as, if you win, I lose. Whereas actually in organisations, it's generally a zero-sum game. Like, if I help you win, you're going to help me win.
Yeah, and also nobody looks well on somebody who's really competitive all the time,
that's right.
unless you're in a really competitive culture
and there
organisation.
Are industries that are super competitive. I don't think we've worked in those probably.
I think consulting can have its moments,
right,
but I think it probably depends on the particular individuals and the teams. Okay, so that was a really good discussion, and like I mentioned, we're going to have a conversation about mentoring and sponsorship that will kind of follow on from this, that we'll release in a couple of weeks. And so I just wanted to recap. For those regular listeners, you'll know that over the next few weeks we're going to be releasing some bonus episodes. Those will become member-only episodes from June. And the reason we're doing that is just so that to support the podcast, basically, and to make sure that we can carry on doing it, because we're really enjoying doing it. We're really enjoying the reception we've had. But for us to keep doing it, we're going to need some support. So what we're going to do is each month we'll release probably at least two episodes for members only. There'll be one which will be an episode that I'll do with a guest, so an extension of a conversation I've had with the guest, and then there'll be another one that will be Michelle and I. And so the one we're going to give you an example next week, which is Dinder Temperon, who was our RAF fighter plane tester turned cybersecurity guru, and she's worked in lots of high performance organisations, and she and I have had a lovely chat about burnout, which will be our bonus episode next week. So I've kind of go through what the factors are from an academic perspective, what are the criteria for burnout, and then Dinder talks about a framework that she has developed and how she likes to, some kind of tips on how to spot it and things like that. So that will be the first bonus episode. We will have 2 more during May, and they will be free during April and May, and then from June onwards they will be part of the podcast membership, which is basically the price of a cup of coffee.
Yes.
Just to help support the podcast.
Yeah, so please support us, because it does cost us to run the podcast, and as you say, for the price of a cup of coffee, it can keep us going for a little bit longer. Yeah,
exactly. Okay, and so then my book recommendation for this week, and for those watching on YouTube, I'm just going to have to move the mic so that I can reach the book. So I'm going to have to read my notes to pronounce the author's title, but the book I'm recommending this week is called Flow, which is, quote, the classic work on how to achieve happiness. And this is a book actually that was released in 1990, and it is written by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I'm sorry, I didn't do that very well, did I?
I don't know. It could be exactly right.
Look, there's lots of consonants in the name. So I'll put it in the show notes. So Mihai has written this book called Flow. And the reason I picked it actually is because when I was talking to Annelen and I talked about, how does she kind of look after her mental well-being, she talked about playing music and she talked about flow.
She did, yes.
And so he has written this book on flow, and he describes it as a state of joy, creativity and total involvement. So it's kind of when you get that peaceful feeling when you're doing something where kind of nothing else matters. And it's really interesting and well written and engaging, and I really like it. So I thought you guys might be interested in that. So that's it for this month's episode. So we will see you in a bonus episode in mid-May, and then we will be back again at the end of May for our next career advice episode.
Thanks, Luella. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. See you then.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe in your podcast app. It helps other people find us. This podcast was produced on Noongar country. We acknowledge and respect the first storytellers of this land and the keepers of culture, and extend that respect to traditional owners and storytellers wherever you may be listening.